Dark mode. It has completely taken over. Youngins and taxpayers alike are staring at white text on black backgrounds all day, experts say, on all of the devices and applications. But where did it come from? Where will it go? Where did it come from, Dark Mode Joe? Back to you in the studio. Dark mode. You know, the feature that darkens the backgrounds and sometimes other colors of digital user interfaces on most operating systems and apps. You're most likely using it right now unless you're a little deranged. At least, that's what the popular opinion around dark mode seems to be. Almost everyone uses it, to the point where our apps can look wrong in light mode. But have you ever questioned why dark mode exists? It hasn't always been here, so who invented it, and when, and why? And how did it get so popular and become so universally loved? When I first wondered about these things, I started thinking about common sense answers. Maybe it's about reducing eye strain, or maybe it's just a matter of personal preference, or just a design trend that caught on. Most of the content on this here website will have you believe it's a combination of those. However, that's just one small part of the equation, and the information I ended up finding leads to issues more systemic, more political, and surprisingly, less scientific than you would think. This is a story about corporate gaslighting, display technologies, grassroots online ecological movements, and how repackaging the meaningful into the sellable can propel a movement into the mainstream while stripping it of its original goal. I'm Chris Kalos, I like computers, and this is the untold story of dark mode. Ecological footprint seems to be the hot new trend with the kids these days, as droves of people are changing their habits en masse to better align with environmental preservation goals. I am being informed, however, that the push for sustainability is coming from an unlikely entity with less than noble intentions. Ooh, mysterious. KLC News Network is following the story closely. Back to me in the studio.
Big oil killed the energy star. Big oil killed the energy star. Petrol came and broke your heart. Oh, 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 oh.
The year is 1992. The first instance of the term ecological footprint appears in a research paper published by the University of British Columbia. Think of the term as describing the impact of something or someone on the environment. Soon enough, it catches on, slowly but surely, and by the late 1990s, what it meant seemed to have become common knowledge. But as of that time, it was merely a descriptive term, not really evoking any political or ecological movements upon its utterance. That was until the lovely year of 2004.
Happy 2004.
Think about a company, off the top of your head, that cares about the environment. Go on, I'll wait. Okay, that's enough waiting. You probably didn't say BP, right? You know, that oil giant that's literally called British Petroleum? Yeah, that BP. Well, in 2004, BP wanted to convince you, yes, you, the average consumer, that you are responsible for climate change, that your ecological footprint matters, and that you can act to save the planet. Oh, but ecological footprint wasn't catchy enough, so they coined the term carbon footprint. In an effort to shift the blame for global warming away from the massively polluting fossil fuel companies onto the average Joe and plain Jane, BP unleashed a marketing campaign into the world promoting the idea of an individual's carbon footprint, urging people to go on carbon-neutral diets and other such wonderful guilt-trippy things to convince them to reduce their impact on the environment. They were so cheeky as to try to soft rebrand themselves into Beyond Petroleum instead of British Petroleum, because nobody knew what BP stood for anyway. This was not the only instance of big oil trying to deny or deflect global warming. As helpfully outlined in a 2021 Guardian article by Jeffrey Supran and Naomi Oreskes, this type of marketing strategy was not new at all in the oil industry by the mid-2000s. Many a campaign to shift public opinion in favor of fossil fuels had been carried out since the 1980s, with almost all of them focusing on guilt-tripping or scaring the public into supporting big oil. But something was different about this one. Something was off. It stuck. The term carbon footprint actually managed to enter the public consciousness as a term and as an idea, with countless people around the globe shifting their habits to align more with sustainability and climate responsibility. Is that bad, you may ask? It sounds good to me. And you know what? it is to a certain extent. All responsible attitudes towards the climate are helpful, but I'm at least a little bit conflicted to say that because of where the push to act sustainably came from. Without systemic change, the actions of individuals in the face of the climate crisis have a minuscule effect, as up to 71% of greenhouse gas emissions can be traced back to oil companies such as BP and ExxonMobil. Call me crazy, but I don't think they were aiming for systemic change. Like, ever. So what's this all got to do with dark mode? I'm mentioning this ad campaign because it surprisingly all ties into the creation of dark mode and the mechanism by which it ended up becoming popular. Before we get there, however, we have to talk about outer space. Okay, not really, just stars. Okay, also not really, just Energy Star, which is actually not in outer space at all. It's a joint agreement between the United States of America and the European Community intended to coordinate energy-efficient labeling programs for office equipment, computers, monitors, copiers, printers, fax machines, scanners, etc. You've seen the Energy Star logo before. If you had a computer a decade or two ago, it might have even shown up on the BIOS boot screen. Well, Energy Star is relevant because in 2001, the US Department of Energy published a web page under the umbrella of Energy Star in which they outlined energy use for computer monitors. Specifically, this web page states, white and bright colors, especially in backgrounds, can use up to 20% more power than black or dark colors. And they made a helpful little table of each color and its power usage next to that paragraph. This page, despite looking hideous and later changing its background to a light beige, completely ignoring its own stipulation, started to gain traction. Once again, slowly, but surely. A study was published in 2002 by the University of California, Berkeley, in which the author Jay Roberson and others questioned the claims of the Department of Energy and put them to the test. On page 15 of this paper, it says, a given monitor requires more power to display a white or light screen than a black or dark screen. Put this quote in your inventory, it'll be helpful later. Later on in the report, they find that, actually, it appears that display color is a significant determinant of power consumption while turned on for CRTs, but not for LCDs, which adds useful context to the claims made by the Department of Energy. Cathode ray tube displays, or CRTs for short, shoot little beams of electrons at the glass to create light, so when the screen is black, they don't have to shoot anything, thus using less energy. Contrast this to LCD screens, which have a backlight that's constantly on regardless of what color is being shown on the screen, so the power consumption is pretty much always the same. Without this knowledge, one could look at the DOE's page and assume that the information applies to any monitor, which is simply not true, according to the study. And yet, the Department of Energy never sought to correct its omission. With this information in mind, the picture is clear and degaussed. CRTs consume more power showing white than they do showing black. About 20% more energy, in fact. And this was the very problem that led a single person to create a single website that would change the course of history forever. A blog post calling for the creation of a black Google has skyrocketed in popularity, causing mass civil unrest. Just kidding. Nobody could ever care that much. KLC News Network analysts predict, however, that this will have massive implications for the future of UI design, whatever that means. I don't know what I just read off the teleprompter, I'm just a news reporter. I shall now continue to read off the teleprompter. This video is not sponsored by any company, it's hopefully sponsored by you. Kalos Likes Computers now has a Patreon where for just €2.50 a month, you can get your name in the credits, enjoy exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and watch Kalos Likes Computers videos with no ads before they come out on YouTube. KLC News Network really appreciates your support, so we can continue to provide top-notch journalism to our viewers. Back to whoever it is in the studio.
From the bad UI I fly, rise like a phoenix, out of the ashes seeking rather than vengeance. Blackened backgrounds you were worn, once I'm transformed, changed color codes. You know I will rise like a phoenix, but you're my flame.
In January 2007, a man going by the name Kevin Thompson, then running a small business called Rising Phoenix Design, published an interactive web page called the Blackback Web Theory. This page took information from the US DOE, as well as a couple of other sources, and arranged it all in a beautiful Flash player element that outlines everything you need to know. But he takes it a step further. If we know this information to be true, if monitors save energy when showing black, why don't we just make all website backgrounds black? That's what Thompson urges the visitors of his webpage to do, and he must have had a lot of visitors for 2007, as he was a part of a couple of alliances which he proudly displayed at the bottom of the page. First is the Graphic Alliance, which described itself as a network of graphic designers, web developers, and related workers who promote fundamental social change through their work. And also the Designers Against Monoculture movement, which urged designers to refuse to create designs that further the creation of a global corporate monoculture. Furthermore, Thompson actually hosted his website through Acorn Host, a woman-owned web hosting service that promised to run all servers on green energy. These clues, although somewhat vague without the context of the 2007 socio-political climate, make it pretty clear where Kevin Thompson stood in the moral and perhaps political spectrum. Socially conscious, ecologically conscious, and very outspoken about both. It comes as no surprise, then, that it was important to him to create this design theory and urge other designers to follow him, even providing them with the logo to embed in their own work. While the design theory was self-aware in its ephemeral nature, it still positioned itself as being of utmost importance in the here and now. Despite knowing that his theory will no longer be needed when LCDs take over completely, Kevin Thompson went through the trouble of doing the digital equivalent of screaming at the top of his lungs about the issues he cared about. It was his way of contributing to a better world with more efficient computer monitors that don't unnecessarily drain energy from the grid, so that in the long run the amount of fossil fuels burnt to create electricity to power monitors is reduced. This page seems to have made the rounds on the 2007 internet, however the hell that happened back then, and was noticed by one Mark Ontkush, a blogger who owned the ecological tech blog EcoIron. Ontkush was a Boston-based green computing consultant, and he said so in his About Me page on the blog. He wrote about, well, green computing, the notion of efficient, sustainable, and ecologically conscious operation and usage of computer infrastructure. How he came about the Rising Phoenix design post is unknown, but it certainly inspired him. On January 20th, in a blog post called Black Pixels Are the New Green Pixels, Ontkush wrote, "Terrific article from Rising Phoenix..." I don't know why I gave him a British accent. "Terrific article from Rising Phoenix Design that points out a rather obvious when you think about it fact. Black pixels take less energy than white pixels." That same day, not even 12 hours later, he made a post that would set off a chain of events nobody could ever imagine. Title: Black Google would save 750 megawatt hours a year. As noted, an all-white web page uses about 74 watts to display, while an all-black page uses only 59 watts. I thought I would do a little math and see what could be saved by moving a high-volume site to the black format. Take a look at Google, who gets about 200 million queries a day. Let's assume each query is displayed for about 10 seconds. That means Google is running for about 550,000 hours every day on some desktop. Assuming that users run Google in full screen mode, the shift to a black background on a CRT monitor will save a total of 74 minus 59 watts. That turns into a global savings of 8.3 megawatt hours per day, or about 3,000 megawatt hours a year. Now take into account that about 25% of the monitors in the world are CRTs, and at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, that's $75,000, a goodly amount of energy in dollars for changing a few color codes. Originally, Ontkush did say 3,000 megawatt hours a year, but this calculation was later corrected to 750 megawatt hours a year, as is evident by the new title of the post. Despite the error, the post was a hit. EcoIron went from receiving around 100 visitors daily to thousands, and the post had been posted to Dig, where it reached number 1 on the front page. Look, even I'm too young to remember Dig, just know that Dig walked so Reddit could run. The original post and subsequent additional posts on the topic were simply inspiring. Imagine how much energy we could save if we all turned the website backgrounds in the world black. Wait, isn't that exactly what Kevin Thompson said? Only factually unsound because everyone started ignoring the CRT thing? And then Kevin Thompson actually never got mentioned ever again or credited by anyone ever for coming up with the idea. Yeah, this is where things start to take an unfair turn. Despite Mark Onkush properly crediting Kevin Thompson in the post called Black Pixels are the New Green Pixels, the general public from Dig and subsequently the media that paid attention to the Black Google post completely missed the previous one. Thus, the Blackback Web Theory, and along with it, all of the author's eco-activism and socially progressive ideas were swept away, never to be mentioned again until the creation of this very video. I'm making this video not only to shed light on how dark mode came to be, but also to ensure that Kevin Thompson, Rising Phoenix Design, the Blackback Web Theory, and the grassroots ecological movements that supported it all are known and remembered. Unfortunately, in the real world, things took a more capitalistic turn. The identity and radical overtones of the Blackback Web Theory movement were erased from history, and in its place we got tech-savvy consumers are lining up today to log into Blackle, the Google alternative that's all black and promises to be so much better for the environment than all those pesky all-white search engines. The phenomenon is taking over the world in what some people are calling a blackout. I'm being informed that nobody's calling it that, I just made it the hell up. Back to Black in the studio.
I see a search engine, I want it painted black. No colors anymore, I want them to turn black.
Of course, someone saw an opportunity here, an untapped market. Just like Onkush's final conclusion was how much money could be saved by turning Google black, someone else's idea was how much money could be made. Toby Heap, who is sometimes called Tony Heap by various sources for some reason, an Australian entrepreneur and owner of Heap Media, quickly put together a website called Blackle, following the exact concept described in Echo Iron. Tony Heap described Blackle in the About page as saving energy because the screen is predominantly black. Not very eloquent with words there, but okay. He then went on to quote the Roberson study, the one that tested and confirmed that CRTs benefit from displaying black backgrounds when it comes to power consumption. Except, he fails to mention anywhere within Blackle that this goes for CRT displays only. This type of omission was common among all the black Google alternatives, and there were actually many of them following the Echo Iron post, as lots of developers tried to cash in on the trend. Notice how we're losing more and more of the original idea as it gets passed on from person to person? For better or for worse, Blackle reigned supreme, becoming far more popular than any of the other black Googles. In 2007 and subsequent years, Blackle got a sizable following of people who set it as their homepage, as it adamantly suggested that you do when you visited it. I was actually one of those people, having set Blackle as my homepage as a literal child in 2008. To my delight in 2025, turns out I was actually saving energy because I was running a CRT display. But this wasn't the case for most users of Blackle. Some people thought it was an official Google product, some people thought it worked on all screens and not just on CRTs, and I mean, why wouldn't they? On both fronts, Blackle was a bit misleading. It was designed to look exactly like a Google product, albeit black, and it never mentioned the CRT requirement for power savings anywhere to maximize the amount of users it would get. Onkush himself lamented that Blackle was probably making loads of money off of ad revenue by being dishonest about which users can save energy using it and which cannot. When CNET reporter Rafe Needleman pointed this out to Heap, Heap told him, regardless, the idea of Blackle is for people to be reminded about saving energy every time they search the web. Here we go again with the echo guilt. So despite Blackle not actually saving energy for most users, the creators still thought he cooked. Or at the very least, he was good at lying to keep the momentum going. From here on out, things actually died down. Blackle remained steadily popular until the mid-2010s, but everything before that was buried. And then we wouldn't hear much about black backgrounds, save for a few browser extensions here and there like Deluminate or Stylish, until KLC News Network tech analyst Chris Miniotis has just informed me that a new invention called the smartphone has spawned into this realm since my last broadcast. I don't know this because they keep me cryogenically frozen between newscasts to retain my youthful appearance. Don't worry, I consented to this. I'm a very psychologically complicated man. Studio in back to the you.
Yeah, I'm gonna take my phone to Old Town Road. Got contrast high, but consumption low. I'm gonna take my phone to Old Town Road. Got contrast high, but consumption low.
Yay, how for OLED. The smartphone, our favorite invention that we love to hate. The early 2010s were a battleground with tons of companies like Samsung, HTC, LG, Sony, Motorola, and others trying to grab a piece of the iPhone pie by releasing smartphones of their own, powered by Google's Android operating system. Each manufacturer would throw one crazy idea after another into the market to see what sticks, what the next big thing in smartphones would be. They would experiment with materials, UI design, button layouts, camera setups, and so on and so forth. But one company would focus their sights elsewhere. So you know the CRT screens we talked about earlier and the reasons they benefit from showing black? Yeah, well, it turns out that CRTs aren't the only screens that thrive with black backgrounds. Enter OLED. Organic light emitting diode, or OLED screens, don't depend on a backlight like LCDs do, and they also don't require a huge power-hungry electron gun to function like CRTs do. In OLED displays, each pixel produces its own light, not only allowing for wider contrast range, but also more critically allowing black pixels to physically turn off completely, consuming little to no energy when doing so. In the early days of the technology, it was reserved for high-end TVs or computer monitors, and it was too expensive for the average consumer to obtain. But Samsung kept putting OLED, specifically Super AMOLED screens, on their flagship Galaxy S series smartphones since the Galaxy S2 in 2011, and soon enough, power users started to catch on to the fact that the blackle concept applies to this screen technology as well. Around that time, the earliest traces of apps with dark mode options appeared, somewhat independently of AMOLED technology being adopted by Samsung. Android was already kind of a dark-themed operating system, as the Holo design language introduced with the tablet-only Android 3.0 Honeycomb had this futuristic black and blue aesthetic to it, and this would be carried on in subsequent versions that made it to smartphones. With Android's popularity picking up after the release of 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich and the new design language being received well by users, developers started to experiment with the design of their apps as well. A third-party Reddit app here, RIP, a Notes app there, and dark mode started to become a feature developers would add to their app to differentiate it from the rest, allowing the user to customize the interface. While a lot of apps with a dark mode option were simply copying the Android design, where dark mode backgrounds were light gray with gradients, a select few, such as Sync for Reddit, RIP, had an OLED mode as early as 2014, which did exactly what you think it did: set the backgrounds to hexadecimal 000000 black. This was a niche feature meant for the few people who owned a smartphone with an OLED display, and it was advertised to those users as a battery-saving feature. But more and more smartphones with that kind of screen kept being released, and demand for dark mode kept growing. More and more users, whether hopping on a bandwagon or genuinely concerned with prolonging battery life, started asking developers to implement it in their apps. Some of them just found it cool looking, others just found it easier on the eyes, and some others found it more pleasant to doom scroll Reddit or Twitter in the middle of the night if the screen wasn't blasting their eyes with bright colors. After a few short years, it seemed like everyone but the OS developers was on the same page. Dark mode was here to stay, and the people wanted it everywhere. By 2019, a critical mass of OLED smartphone users was achieved. Operating system developers couldn't ignore the pressure of their user bases anymore, and so, that very same year, all three operating system manufacturers, Apple, Google, and Microsoft, implemented some form of official dark mode. Google introduced it first in Android 10, much to the satisfaction of Android users who had already been using it on a per-app basis. Apple followed by introducing it in iOS 13, despite having put an OLED screen on the iPhone 10 2 years prior. Classic Apple delay. Microsoft also implemented it in Windows 10, but only kinda. Take a look. It wouldn't be until Windows 11 that Microsoft would actually implement a functioning dark mode in Windows. But whatever, that's just Microsoft being incompetent as usual. So that's the whole story, right? OLED screens brought dark mode back from the dead and everyone lived happily ever after? Well, no. As you can see from the progress bar of this video, there's a bit more to talk about. It's time to tie everything together and truly uncover the untold story of dark mode. Money.
Στόχος είναι τα λεφτά. Έτσι μου είπε η μαμά. Έτσι μου είπε και ο μπαμπάς. Πού να πας χωρίς αυτά.
One big question that's been on my mind throughout researching this video is, why did we ever care enough to ask developers to implement dark mode everywhere? I mean, sure, it looks cool, has the potential to save a bit of battery life on some devices, and may or may not reduce eye strain under certain conditions. The research on that one is inconclusive. But how did it get here? Well, let's retrace our steps. Blackback Web Theory, EcoIron, Blackle, Android Hollow, OLED screens. Do you notice something? It's not very easy to see, so let me give you a little hint. None of this was ever necessary. Let me explain. The Blackback Web Theory was posted by Kevin Thompson in 2007 with the motivation of saving up to 20% energy on CRT displays, which made up 25% of the market share. It was made for 1/4 of users to save a maximum of 1/5 of energy. So in the grand scheme of things, even if every single website in the world turned black overnight in 2007, implementing the Blackback Web Theory would have amounted to maximum savings of 5% across all users. And that's under ideal conditions where a website is an all-white page in full screen and it turns into an all-black page in full screen. And as we know, that's simply not how computer content works. I'm here to make the point that the creation of the Blackback Web Theory was nothing more than the result of the eco-guilt instilled in us by big oil marketing campaigns and coordinated government efforts to reinforce it. BP successfully penetrated the public consciousness with their carbon footprint propaganda, which placed a disproportionate amount of responsibility for carbon emissions on ordinary citizens. At the same time, the US Department of Energy urged users to change the colors of their user interfaces to save energy. This concoction of events is factual. The conclusion I came to independently, though, is that Kevin Thompson of Rising Phoenix Design, as a socially and ecologically conscious citizen and artist, was influenced by this insidious propaganda. But of course, saving even 5% energy at best was a form of ecological activism and better than doing nothing. Until EcoIron came in. Mark Onkush, despite his best efforts to spotlight Rising Phoenix Design, ended up doing something worse. He managed to reframe it. Absent from his work is the language of carbon emissions, ecoactivism, and green energy, but present is the language of monetary gains. Onkush's bottom line in his massively influential Black Google article is that up to $75,000 a year could be saved by this hypothetical entity that defies real logic just by changing a few color codes, he says. Blackle was successful not because it capitalized on a popular post, but because it served ads and sold itself as green. But by then, all the ecoactivism inherently tied to the original concept had already been lost. Within just a few short weeks of the Rising Phoenix Design post going up, it had been stripped of its political nature and commodified. The truth of the matter is that dark mode only took off because it proved to be profitable. Corporations don't care about you, your eyes, or the environment. They care about convincing you that they do, so that you buy their products. Dark mode couldn't make money for companies during the time before OLED screens were everywhere because there was no selling points for it. Instead, it was relegated to a niche feature that nerdy developers would place in their apps for other nerds to appreciate, for pretty much no purposes other than aesthetic. However, as soon as OLED smartphone users reached a critical mass, suddenly every company under the sun was rushing to implement dark mode and repeat the same selling points to consumers. Helps your eyes, saves battery. Helps your eyes, saves battery. Helps your eyes doesn't even save battery because this is Windows and we didn't implement it almost anywhere anyway. In reality, dark mode only saves a significant amount of battery on OLED screens at high brightness levels, and it's been shown to only really reduce eye fatigue when the ambient light of the environment is adequate, as opposed to the popular opinion that it's better for really dark environments. Some studies even claim it increases eye strain under all conditions and advise against dark mode altogether. Again, the research is contradictory and inconclusive. And just like BP managed to convince you that climate change is your fault actually, tech companies manage to convince you that their lack of battery optimization is your fault, actually, for not using dark mode. Oh, and the eye fatigue you get from their OLED screens? Yeah, also your fault. Just use dark mode. The bottom line is, Dark mode is a staple feature only because the companies that created the issues that led to its creation also managed to convince us that it solves them. Whether you like dark mode or not is up to you. Personally, I use it on everything. But I found it important to make this video because I felt the need to tell this long-forgotten story and make sure as many people as possible are aware that nobody is immune to propaganda. Not you, not me, not anyone. Dark mode was never going to revolutionize phone battery life, fix your sleep schedule, or fix your eyes. But it's here to stay, and that's still okay. This was originally a thesis proposal for university, but I repurposed it into a video for this channel. Please give me feedback on this format, as I'd love to do more video essay style content in the future, if my audience is into it. If you liked it, please let me know by liking it. If you didn't like it, please tell me the aspects I could improve. Thank you for your continued support on this here YouTube channel. It's truly a dream come true for me to be a nerd on the internet talking about things that interest me, and it's only possible because you, the viewer, are watching my video right now. If you've made it to the outro, you're a real one, and I wholeheartedly thank you for watching. Just kidding, video's not over yet. I really quite enjoy making my videos, but it's not financially sustainable whatsoever without some extra income. In order to continue making my content, I have to pay my rent and put food in my mouth, and unfortunately this stuff costs money. So if you're down to help me with that more directly, I have a Patreon where you can get exclusive behind-the-scenes content from Kalos Computers and get early access to my content before it goes up on YouTube for just €2.50 a month. Let me know your thoughts in the comments or on my Discord server, which you can find a link to in the description. Oh gosh. Absolutely no generative AI was used in the creation of this video. It was entirely made by humans. For KLC News Network, I'm vaguely British Chris Kalos. I like computers, and I'll see you next time.
All right, buddy, back to the cry chamber you go.
No, please, no, I want to enjoy nature, please, no.